Princess Catherine in tears after finding a note in Princess Diana's jewelry box. Within the storied walls of Kensington Palace, the name of Princess Diana still lingers like a hauntingly beautiful shadow, leaving an indelible mark on the public memory in the heart of the British royal family. She is remembered not only as the people's princess, but also as a symbol of grace, compassion, and extraordinary inner strength. More than 2 decades have passed since the fateful day that claimed her life, yet the emotional legacy Diana left behind remains ever present, from heartfelt tales passed down in whispers to personal items that still carry the warmth of her memory. These were not just jewels, gowns, or keepsakes, but fragments of a soul that had loved and endured to the very end. That legacy, however, was never merely about material value. Within the royal family, every item that once belonged to Diana is like a key unlocking deep layers of emotion, a source of pride, yet also a pang of regret. And when Princess Catherine, often seen as the one to carry forward her late mother-in-law's spirit, happened upon an old jewelry box, she could not hold back her tears. The question hung in the air, heavy and haunting. What could have moved Princess Catherine to cry upon opening her late mother-in-law's jewelry box? The story we are about to uncover is not simply a touching royal family moment. It is a meeting point between past and present, between maternal love and unspoken truths. Inside that box, beyond the glimmer of precious metals, lay a secret wrapped in a small, handwritten note, a message Diana left behind, carrying a meaning far greater than any piece of jewelry. This video will take you through layers of memory, showing how Diana's love still quietly lingers, reaching the hearts of those left behind. It is a moving story of royal family bonds, a secret kept for more than 20 years, and the profound power of a simple note that holds a world of love. When people speak of Princess Diana, they often call her by the affectionate title the People's Princess, a name born not of ceremony or rank, but from the hearts of millions around the world. Diana Spencer entered the royal household as a shy young woman, only to grow into a global icon of elegance, kindness, and resilience. She was not confined to grand banquets or formal events. She went to impoverished regions, hospitals, orphanages, and even war zones. From holding the hands of AIDS patients at a time when fear and stigma ran high, to walking through minefields in Angola, Diana shattered the cold and distant mold long associated with royalty. Her charitable work brought more than material aid. It rekindled faith and compassion in the public. She became a voice for the voiceless, a pillar of comfort for those society had forgotten. People adored Diana not only for her beauty and poise, but because she would stoop to listen and open her arms to embrace another's pain. And yet, her life ended far too soon for Arachos, in tragedy. On the night of August 31st, 1997, news of a devastating car crash in Paris sent shockwaves around the world. Diana was gone at just 36, leaving behind a grief so deep and countless questions that remain unanswered to this day. The sight of hundreds of thousands of flowers blanketing the gates of Kensington Palace, and the tears of strangers from every corner of the globe, proved she was far more than a royal figure. She had become a part of humanity's collective heart. Among those most deeply shaken that day were her two sons, Prince William and Prince Harry. William was just 15, Harry only 12. Diana was not only their mother, but their confidant, protector, and the one who taught them to see the world through the lens of compassion. Amid the pressures and constraints of royal life, she worked tirelessly to give them as normal a childhood as possible, trips to the park, fast food meals, or afternoons spent playing video games at a friend's house. William, as the eldest, shared a particularly close bond with her. She often confided in him about her deepest feelings, her quiet joys, and her lingering sorrows. In many ways, William knew better than anyone that true Diana both her strength and her fragility. After Diana's passing, many of her personal belongings were carefully preserved like priceless treasures. Among them, her jewelry box has always been regarded as an object of deep symbolism. not merely for the monetary value of its glittering diamonds, pearls, or sapphires, but for the memories and private stories it held. It was where she kept pieces tied to the milestones of her life, the iconic blue sapphire engagement ring, the pair of earrings she favored at charity events, or the bracelet William had once given his mother for a special occasion. What made this box even more extraordinary was the way Diana cherished each piece. To her, they were not simply adornments, but silent witnesses to moments of gone and chapters of sorrow. Some were gifts from close friends, some were diplomatic tokens, and some bore the mark of love, whether romantic or maternal. In that sense, the jewelry box was not just a container of precious items, but a diary written in gold and gemstones, where each piece was a page telling the story of Diana's life. Years later, when Catherine, wife of Prince William, happened upon the box, she did not merely see a collection of exquisite jewels. She felt as though she had touched a fragment of her husband's family history, sensing both the love and the lingering loss that still hung in the air. In that moment, each sparkling stone seemed to carry an untold story, each ornament concealing its own depth of emotion. But Catherine had no idea that among the treasures there lay a small secret powerful enough to bring her to tears, a simple note carrying the heart of a mother, a princess who had gone but had never stopped watching over the ones she loved. The question now was not only what made Catherine cry, but also why had Diana chosen to hide the note there? Of all places, could it be that she knew one day William's wife would discover it, and in that moment, her message would find its way directly to the heart of its intended reader? That day, the London sky was heavy and gray, raindrops tapping softly against the window pane of a quiet room in Kensington Palace. Catherine entered, intending to choose a special piece of jewel to wear to the memorial ceremony for Princess Diana, the late mother-in-law she had never met, yet to whom she had always felt an invisible bond. An elderly housekeeper led her to the room where Diana's keepsakes were stored. The air seemed suspended, carrying the faint scent of old wood and the lingering trace of perfume still clinging to carefully folded silk scarves. Catherine knelt before an oak cabinet and slid open the bottom drawer. Inside, resting on dark blue velvet, was a small ebony box, simple yet elegant. She lifted the lid, and at once her eyes caught the sharp gleam of precious stones reflecting the light. Bracelets, earrings, and the famous blue sapphire ring lay still, like witnesses to a time both glorious and marked by tears. Catherine smiled faintly until her gaze settled on something unusual, a small envelope tucked between the velvet lining and the side of the box. The envelope was slightly yellowed, its corners softened by time. On it, in soft yet steady handwriting, were the words, "For the one who will love William." Catherine froze. Her heart quickened, as though the room itself had shrunk, leaving only her and that piece of paper. She lifted the envelope carefully, her fingers trembling. This was not like opening any ordinary letter. It was like hearing a whisper from the past, from a woman who had left the world, but whose presence had never faded. Catherine drew a deep breath, then slowly broke the seal. Inside was a thin sheet of paper, folded into thirds, carrying a faint scent of lavender and something warm that was impossible to name. The handwritten words emerged, each stroke of the pen reaching straight into her heart. If you are reading these words, it means you have become William's partner in life. My dear, I know William is a prince, but you will soon realize that this does not guarantee happiness. And before millions of eyes, you will see him strong and steadfast. But when it is just the two of you, you will understand that he too can be fragile, that he too feels sadness, and at times the loneliness so deep it is almost unbearable. I know that being the wife of a prince will never be an easy road. You will face pressures that outsiders cannot possibly imagine, and there will be moments when you feel lost, even within this very home. But remember this, William needs a place to return to, and that place is you. Love him not because he is a prince, but because he is a man who has endured great loss from a very young age. If one day your heart is no longer with him, do not betray him. Do not let the look of hurt take root in William's eyes. Leave with kindness and respect, so that the beautiful memories may remain. I believe you will understand that sometimes the greatest form of love is knowing when to let go without causing pain. Though I am not here to meet you, I have always wished for you to be the one who could give William what I longed most for him, peace, and a love that is true. By the time she reached the end, Catherine felt her throat tighten. She set the letter down, yet her eyes refused to leave the page. Silent tears slipped down her cheeks, mingling with the sound of the rain outside, like a mournful melody drifting in from the past. She remained seated for a long time, her hands resting gently on the yellowed paper, as though afraid that letting go might cause the words to dissolve, taking with them the faint warmth that still lingered from another lifetime. All sounds in the room seemed to fade, leaving only the patter of rain on the window and the steady beat of her own heart echoing in her chest. She could feel every word, every line of Diana's letter resonating not as a message to a stranger, but as a quiet conversation between two women, one who had weathered the storm and one who was living it now. Catherine closed her eyes. She pictured Princess Diana at a desk, bathed in the soft glow of a golden lamp, pen in hand, her expression both tender and distant. Perhaps, as she wrote, Diana had imagined the woman she would never meet, yet who would share her son's life. And perhaps, deep down, she had foreseen that her son would one day need a special kind of anchor, a love strong enough to withstand the crushing weight of expectation and the unblinking gaze of the world. The words in the letter did more than stir Catherine's compassion. They awakened a deep sense of familiarity, almost an unspoken kinship. She thought of her own early days in the royal family, the blinding flash of the press cameras, the smile she was expected to maintain even when her heart was heavy, the cold scrutiny over her wardrobe, her posture, even the expression on her face. She remembered the silent evenings in the vast palace, when William was consumed by work or away on official trips, and she would sit alone with a cooling cup of tea, feeling like a guest lost in her own life. And then it struck her, this was what Diana had lived through. A young woman, barely out of her 20s, thrust into the role of Princess of Wales, placed at the very center of a universe governed by ceremony, power, and unspoken rules. Not only was she expected to smile for the public, but she had to bear the weight of an unfulfilled marriage, while facing rumors and constant scrutiny. Catherine felt a chill at the realization that, despite the changing times, the sense of isolation in a world full of people was something both she and her late mother-in-law had known all too well. Diana's letter was not only a message of love for William, but also a gentle warning about the price of life within the royal family. Being the wife of a prince will never be an easy road. The phrase echoed like a prophecy. Catherine had long understood this truth, but it was only in reading the letter that she felt it seep into her very bones. For the woman who had written it had paid for those words with her youth and her happiness. She wondered if, when Diana wrote this letter, she felt powerless. Powerless because she knew she could no longer be by William's side to shield him from the pain she herself had endured. Powerless because all she could do was entrust her hopes to a woman whose name she did not know, whose face she had never seen. And it was this trust from a mother who was gone that made Catherine's heart tighten. In that moment, Catherine no longer saw Diana as the icon frozen in press photographs or the radiant figure in documentary reels. She saw a mother full of love, full of worry, and achingly vulnerable. A mother who had watched her son grow up beneath a halo of grandeur, yet also in the shadows of loneliness. And Catherine understood the love Diana wished for William was not the shimmering romance of fairy tales, but the quiet peace of a true home to return to. Catherine's fingers closed gently around the paper, as though she were answering the message of the woman who had passed. A silent vow formed in her mind to protect William, not only as the wife who stands beside a prince, but as a steadfast companion who will not leave his side. She would be the place where he could set down the invisible crown and simply be himself, a man who lost his mother at 15, yet still longed to be loved like a child. When her eyes fell again on the jewelry box, Catherine realized that each piece inside was beautiful, not just for its material worth, but because it carried the stories, breath, and emotions of a woman who had entered history. Those glittering stones had once witnessed Diana's truest smiles, as well as her tear-reddened eyes. And now the box had become a bridge between two women, one gone, one continuing the journey, sharing an understanding that perhaps only they could truly grasp. Outside, the rain still fell, but Catherine felt something quietly warm take root inside her. She knew the road ahead would be full of challenges. There would be days when exhaustion would tempt her to give up. But this letter, its simple yet heartfelt words, would always be a silent source of strength. It reminded her that even if the world turned its back, there was still a mother from the past watching over her, trusting her with a piece of her heart. Catherine folded the letter, slipped it back into its envelope, and returned it carefully to its place in the box. She closed the lid, but the connection it had sparked would never close. And as she left the room, she carried not only a piece of jewelry for the memorial service, but also a promise never to let William stand alone in the darkness his mother once knew too well. She stepped out of Diana's memorial room with her heart still trembling. In her hands, the jewelry box was shut tight, but on her head, catching the dim light of the palace corridor, was the intricate Cambridge lover's knot tiara. It was one of Diana's most iconic pieces, a crown whose value lay not only in its diamonds, pearls, and finely woven white gold, but also in the deep emotions and memories it carried. The tiara was heavy, not only with its precious stones, but with the weight of history and the envy, longing, and unspoken dreams of the women who had walked through the royal gates before her. Diana had worn it for some of the most important moments of her life, and it had become a symbol of elegance laced with the quiet sorrow the public always sensed. When Catherine looked at her reflection in the grand hallway mirror, she did not just see the Duchess of Cambridge. She caught the faint silhouette of Diana standing behind her, and in that instant, she felt the letter's meaning more deeply than ever. She was now her late mother-in-law's guardian for William, protecting him not only with love, but with a presence so steadfast it could not be ignored. The memorial service was held in a great hall, candlelight flickering against the marble floor. Large portraits of Diana stood in places of honor, surrounded by bouquets of white flowers, the color of purity and remembrance. A solemn stillness filled the air, the hushed whispers of the guests blending with the soft strains of string music, as though time itself had begun to flow backward, carrying everyone to the years when Diana still walked among them. The great doors swung open, and Catherine stepped inside. Conversation softened to a murmur. From the high ceiling, a shaft of light poured down, setting the tiara on her head ablaze, each pearl and diamond scattering its own shimmer. For a few seconds, the eyes fixed on her were not drawn only by title or beauty, but by the ghost of an image that had once moved the world, the image of Diana, the people's princess. Among the astonished gazes, one pair of eyes darkened Camilla, the current queen, seated in the front row. Her face tightened, then paled as she recognized the piece of jewelry Catherine wore. It was something she had never been allowed to touch in all her decades within the royal family, the tiara that once belonged to Diana, the woman whose name the world could never separate from William and Charles. Camilla knew all too well the symbolic weight of that tiara. It was more than jewelry, it was a silent declaration. And Catherine's choice to wear it, at a memorial for Diana and, directly before her, was as clear as it was deliberate. Diana is still here, and I am the one who carries that image forward. A flicker of anger crossed Camilla's eyes. Her lips pressed together, her hands clenched in her lap. In the royal court, gestures like this were rarely accidents. Every detail, every chosen ornament, carried meaning, and Camilla understood better than anyone that Catherine's wearing of this tiara was no coincidence. But Catherine didn't look at her. She moved forward slowly, her steps light yet steady, the deep blue silk of her gown swaying with each pace. Her eyes were fixed on William, waiting at the end of the aisle. When their gazes met, he smiled a smile both proud and touched with emotion. He recognized the tiara instantly, and he knew this was more than a style choice. It was a message of love and protection. Catherine's unspoken reply to a letter he didn't even know existed. The silence in the hall was layered with meaning. For those who had loved Diana, the moment was a jolt of tenderness, as though she had stepped back into the room. For the press, it was tomorrow's front-page headline, "Catherine wears Diana's tiara," a subtle message to the royal family, and for Camilla, it was a precise, cutting reminder that even seated on the throne, there was a figure she could never replace in the public's heart. Catherine knew there would be whispers after the service, voices of support, voices of criticism. She didn't care. Her thoughts were on Diana, on the shaky yet resolute handwriting on that old letter. She knew this was her way of saying her silent vow still stood to protect William and to keep Diana's legacy alive, no matter the years or the shifting crowns. As the service began, Catherine sat beside William, their hands intertwined. The tiara on her head glimmered in the candlelight, and somewhere, if only in spirit, it felt as though Diana was still watching, smiling softly, content that her son had found a wife both gentle and strong enough to weather even the unseen storms of the palace. The memorial ended in quiet applause, eyes still glistening with unshed tears. The music faded, the candles burned on, casting a warm light as if reluctant to release Diana's presence. Catherine rose, walking with William into the corridor behind the hall. But as William paused to speak with a visiting diplomat, she heard slow, deliberate footsteps approach from behind. A heady, familiar perfume lingered in the air, and then a low, measured voice, cool with a hint of steel, broke the quiet. That tiara was rather striking tonight. Catherine turned. Camilla stood there, her gaze sweeping from the crown on Catherine's head to the deep blue gown, and finally settling on Catherine's calm, unwavering eyes. The air between them seemed to thicken, the only sound the steady tick of the grandfather clock echoing down the hallway. "Yes, Your Majesty," Catherine replied, her voice soft but unwavering. "I thought this was the most fitting occasion for my mother-in-law's crown to make its return." Camilla's eyes narrowed slightly. "You do realize many will see that as a bold choice." "Perhaps," Catherine said with the faintest of smiles, her gaze steady. "But sometimes, to truly honor someone's memory, we must do something that makes people pause and remember who they truly were." Camilla was silent for a beat, then stepped closer, closing the distance until their words could not carry beyond them. "Catherine, in this place, every action is observed and interpreted in more ways than one. I trust you understand that." It sounded like a warning, but Catherine did not flinch. She looked straight into Camilla's eyes, his eyes well-versed in the storms of royal politics. "I understand better than most, Your Majesty. But I also believe there are values which, once loved and respected, deserve to be protected, no matter who is watching." In that moment, when Camilla realized she was facing not just a beautiful and gracious woman, but one strong enough to stand firm against invisible pressures. And that strength unsettled her because it did not need a throne to be recognized. Camilla gave a faint nod, a thin smile touching her lips. "I do hope you'll always remain as strong as you are today." Without waiting for a reply, she turned, leaving behind a trace of her heavy perfume and a lingering chill in the long corridor. Catherine stood still for a few seconds, her fingers brushing the base of the crown. She thought of Diana, of the letter, and knew she had just endured a conversation where the silences spoke louder than the words. Life in the royal family was a vast chessboard, and every move demanded calculation. Tonight, she had placed a piece on the board named Diana's legacy, and she would not allow anyone to take it away. The night was deep. The palace was so quiet that even the wind threading through the window frames could be heard. Catherine walked slowly along the corridor, the warm gold of the wall lamps casting light across her face, catching a glint from the pearls in her crown. When the door to her private chambers clicked shut behind her, the stillness became absolute. She removed her gloves, set them on the table, then reached up to take off the crown. It was heavier than she had imagined, not just in weight, but in meaning. She laid it gently on a white silk cloth upon her dressing table, beside the jewelry box of Diana's she had opened before the ceremony. The lamplight made the diamonds and pearls sparkle, but Catherine knew the true radiance lay in the story behind them. She opened the box and drew out the old letter. The handwriting slanted slightly, the strokes unsteady, yet the words carried a sincerity that gripped the heart. Catherine read each line slowly, as if carving them into memory. My future daughter-in-law. William may be a prince before millions, but in his heart there will always be empty spaces. When you stand by him, love him not only as a husband, but as a soul in need of shelter. And if one day you no longer love him, do not betray him. Leave quietly and do not wound a heart that has already borne too much loss. Catherine's eyes burned. She ran her fingertips along the edge of the paper, as though holding Diana's hand across the decades. Images of Diana flashed before her, that radiant smile in the crowd, the embraces she gave children in war zones, and the lonely gaze she wore amid glittering banquets. She realized she had done something that, if Diana were alive, might have earned her a smile of approval, wearing that crown not as a display of status, but as a reminder that Diana's legacy still lived, still breathed, and was still defended. Catherine folded the letter and set it carefully back inside the box. She placed the crown beside it, as though keeping them forever side by side, symbols of beauty and strength, of pride and compassion. She stood for a moment longer, looking at the two treasures, and whispered, "Rest easy, ma'am. I'll keep my promise." Outside, the wind still moved. But within the room, a strange peace settled, as though somewhere, Diana was smiling quietly, watching her promise take root and live on and in the hearts of those she loved. The next morning, the London sun rose slowly, spilling pale gold through the palace's towering windows. Across the front pages of the nation's papers, the image of Catherine entering the memorial service in the legendary crown dominated every headline. Bold letters declared Diana's spirit returns. Princess Catherine and the silent message. In the streets, the public buzzed with talk. Many spoke with emotion, saying they felt as if they had seen Diana again, not just in the jewels, but in Catherine's bearing, in the proud yet gentle light in her eyes. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was entirely different. The echoes of the ceremonies still lingered in the halls, but beneath them moved quiet, unpredictable currents. Catherine knew that the moment she placed that crown on her head, a new chapter had begun, one in which she was not only William's wife, not merely a princess, but the keeper of the flame for the legacy of the people's princess. The night before, as she had set the crown and the letter side by side, she had silently vowed to guard them both as priceless treasures. And now, with the world watching, Catherine knew the road ahead would be fraught with trials. But she was ready to walk it not for the throne, but for love, for William, and for a promise made to the woman she had never met, yet who had left the deepest mark upon her heart, Diana Spencer. And somewhere beneath that wide expanse of sky, perhaps Diana was smiling more at peace than ever before.